right now, India handles millions of standard shipping containers every single year. But, and this is the really crazy part, almost all of those massive skyscraper-sized cargo ships carrying India's global trade, they can't actually dock at an Indian port.
No, they really can't. It's a massive structural handicap.
Right, so almost all of those containers have to be parked in a completely different country first, just so India can access its own trade. So, welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at the newly approved Vadhavan port in Maharashtra, and I'll tell you right now, this is not just some story about moving cargo boxes from point A to point B.
Definitely not.
No, this is a highly analytical, strategic war room briefing for you. We are talking about national importance, a massive geographic handicap, and, well, a 76,000 crore rupee gamble to completely shift the balance of global trade.
It really is a massive pivot. I mean, you cannot truly understand global trade without understanding maritime choke points and, more importantly, the concept of transshipment.
Right, the transshipment deficit.
Exactly. If you look at the current economic context, India is aggressively pushing toward a massive export-import trade volume.
Yeah.
We are talking an estimated $1.6 to $2 trillion by the year 2030.
2 trillion. Wow.
And to hit those numbers, you need infrastructure that can physically handle the sheer weight of that trade. So Vadhavan is essentially the physical key being built to unlock that volume. It represents a definitive shift toward strategic autonomy, fundamentally rewiring how the country interacts with the global supply chain.
And that is exactly why we're unpacking this today. Think of this as an exam answer mentorship session. We want to give you the exact frameworks, the memory anchors, and the critical evaluations you need to master this. But before we get into the massive engineering feats and the billions of dollars, we need to look at the background layer.
Right, we have to define the structural problem being solved.
Exactly, the why before the what.
Yeah.
So why does India actually need to build a brand new megaport? What is the core trigger event or issue with the ports they already have?
Well, the core issue is fundamentally a historical and geographical curse. I mean, we often think of India's massive coastline, over 7,000 kilometers of it, as a pure maritime asset.
Which it is, right.
It is, but it comes with a severe geographical limitation. India has a very long continental shelf. So in practical terms, this means the coast is surrounded by expansive, incredibly shallow waters. The water depth, what the shipping industry calls the draft, is simply insufficient near the coast for modern megaships.
Okay, I love a good analogy, so let's think about it like this. It's like having a booming, world-class manufacturing plant, but your driveway is just too narrow for massive 18-wheeler delivery trucks.
That's actually a perfect way to look at it.
Right, because those massive container ships can't physically get close to your factory doors without scraping the bottom and getting stuck. You have to park them in a neighbor's yard, unload everything into smaller vans, and carry the boxes over to your house one by one.
That is precisely the mechanism at play, and that neighbor's yard is usually another country. I mean, the cost of that narrow driveway is staggering when you look at the data.
Give us the numbers on that.
Currently, Indy handles about 4.6 million TEUs of transshipment cargo. A TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit, which is basically the standard shipping container size.
Right, the metal boxes we see on trains.
Exactly. But out of that total 4.6 million, a massive 4.2 million of those containers are processed entirely outside the country. Because the existing Indian ports lack the deep draft for megaships, most cargo destined for or leaving India is forced to be offloaded in places like Colombo and Sri Lanka, or transferred mid-sea into smaller vessels.
Wait, 4.2 out of 4.6 million. That is a massive structural bottleneck. You have millions of containers basically paying rent in a foreign port just to get to their final destination.
Yeah, the real estate costs and the sheer time wasted are immense. It causes massive delays, increases turnaround times, and creates a critical reliance on foreign infrastructure.
So the government rationale here is to literally bypass the geographical curse. If the water near the beach is too shallow, they have to build far enough out into the ocean to catch those megaships.
Which requires a monumental scale of engineering. To solve this, you can't just expand an existing facility. You need a true all-weather, greenfield, deep draft megaport. And that means starting from scratch in deep water.
Okay, let's lock in some facts and data here. This is our memory layer. When I saw the price tag on this, 76,220 crore rupees, I had to do a double take.
It's an astronomical sum.
It really is.
Yeah.
So let's break that down for our listeners to underline. How is that money actually being structured, and who owns this thing?
So the 76,220 crore rupee budget covers the total project cost, and that crucially includes the land acquisition component. The institutional structure executing this is uniquely designed. It's an SPV, a special purpose vehicle called Vadhavan Port Project Limited, or VPPL.
And it's a joint venture, right?
Correct. It's a specific partnership split two ways. You have a 74% stake held by the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Authority, which is the entity that runs India's current biggest container port. And then a 26% stake is held by the Maharashtra Maritime Board.
Okay, so the Central Port Authority and the state are teaming up 74 to 26 split. And what about the actual scale? We said they have to build out into the ocean. How big are we talking?
We're talking about a target capacity of 298 million metric tons, or MMT, per annum. That includes 23.2 million TEUs. To physically achieve that, they are reclaiming 1,448 hectares of land right out of the sea.
Wow. Over 1,400 hectares of ocean just filled in.
Yes, and to protect all of that reclaimed land from the raw force of the Arabian Sea, they're constructing a massive 10.14-kilometer offshore breakwater.
A 10-kilometer wall in the ocean. Okay, so for everyone listening, lock these memory anchors in. 76,000 crore rupees, 290 MMT capacity, and that's 74-26 institutional split.
Those are the core operational facts, yes.
But here's the thing. You can throw 76,000 crore rupees at a problem, build a massive wall, but it doesn't guarantee a solution if the governance framework running the place is outdated.
That's a very valid point.
Right, because historically, big state-run ports get bogged down in bureaucracy. Cranes break, paperwork piles up, ships wait in line. How is the government structuring this to avoid the old traps of red tape?
This is where we see a highly strategic policy and institutional shift. They are moving away from the old model of a state-run monolith. The government is utilizing what is called a landlord model through a public-private partnership.
Let's pause there, because PPP is a term that gets thrown around a lot. How does a landlord model actually work in practice? Does it stop red tape or just add a corporate middleman?
It fundamentally changes the incentive structure. Think of it like a massive shopping mall. The government owns the physical building, so the land, the breakwater, the basic infrastructure. They act as the landlord and the regulatory authority.
Okay, the state owns the concrete.
Right. But the private companies lease the individual stores, which in this case are the actual shipping terminals. The private sector brings in their own cranes, their own software, their own workforce to operate those terminals. This introduces fierce competition among the terminal operators.
Ah, I see. So if one operator is slow or drowning in red tape, a shipping company will just dock at the terminal next door.
Exactly. This competition naturally reduces handling charges and forces operators to invest heavily in automation.
That makes perfect sense. So let's talk about the hard infrastructure they're leasing out. The sources detail 9 container terminals, and each one is a massive 1,000 meters long.
Yes, the scale is unprecedented for India.
Plus, they have 4 multi-purpose berths, 4 liquid cargo berths for energy needs, a ro-ro berth, which means roll-on, roll-off, so vehicles can drive right off the ships, and crucially, a Coast Guard berth. But wait, getting the container off the ship fast only solves half the problem.
Right, the inland logistics.
Exactly. Historically, our ports suffered from terrible hinterland connectivity. You could get the cargo off the ship, but then it would sit in a yard for weeks because the roads and railways were jammed.
And a port is only as good as its hinterland connectivity. If the cargo can't move inland, the port just becomes a very expensive parking lot. The planners recognize this, which is why the entire project is explicitly aligned with the PM Gati Shakti program.
The National Master Plan for Multimodal Connectivity.
Precisely. They aren't just building a place for ships to park, they're building a highly integrated transit hub. The approvals for connectivity are actually already in place.
So they aren't waiting until it's built to figure out the roads?
No. The Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has already approved direct road connectivity to national highways. Simultaneously, the Ministry of Railways has approved linkages connecting the port directly to the dedicated rail freight corridor and the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway.
That's huge. That directly solves the old bottleneck. The moment a container touches the ground, it has a high-speed logistical artery straight into the industrial heartland. So let's transition to the significance analysis, the so what. If you're trying to explain this to a colleague, what does this actually mean for the bigger picture?
Well, the most immediate economic domino effect is alleviating the massive congestion currently choking the JNPA. Vadhavan will act as the new primary hub, managing the massive global traffic and then distributing cargo to smaller ports via a hub-and-spoke model.
And when you handle larger volumes like that, you naturally lower the freight cost per unit. The sources also mention that this port will promote economies of agglomeration,
Yes, which is a vital administrative keyword to remember.
basically meaning that when you build a hub this massive, it acts like an economic gravity well. Right. It pulls in suppliers, warehousing, and logistics firms to cluster around it.
Exactly. You don't just get a port, you get a sprawling industrial ecosystem. On a societal level, this is estimated to generate 12,000 direct and indirect employment opportunities just from the initial clustering.
Wow, 12,000 jobs.
Yeah. Furthermore, capturing that 4.2 million containers of foreign transshipment drain directly serves the broader vision of Atmanirbhar, or self-reliance. It completely insulates the country's supply chains from external shocks.
And speaking of external shocks, let's pivot to the defense and strategic angle. Because when I was reading through the layout, the inclusion of that dedicated Coast Guard berth immediately caught my eye. This isn't just about civilian trade, is it?
No, it's not. In modern governments, national security and economic security are increasingly indistinguishable. The Coast Guard berth highlights the dual-use, civil-military applications of this infrastructure.
So it's about projecting presence.
Yes, securing critical supply chain vulnerabilities, protecting vital XM trade routes, and projecting a robust maritime security presence along the western seaboard.
Especially when you zoom out to the global map. Vadhavan is positioned as a critical strategic node for two massive global corridors. You have the IMEC, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, and the NNSTC, the International North-South Transport Corridor.
Right. It's essentially the anchor point for a massive economic outreach. And when India shifts from simply participating in global trade to actively directing it through their own mega hubs, they're moving from mere capability demonstration to true strategic autonomy.
That's a great phrase, strategic autonomy. But here is where it gets really interesting, because no massive infrastructure project happens without friction, and it's time for our critical evaluation layer.
The reality check.
Exactly. We need to play devil's advocate here. You cannot just look at the shiny government proposals. You have to critically evaluate the resource constraints, the environmental costs, and the institutional challenges on the ground. And just a quick note to you, the listener. We are impartially reporting these diverse viewpoints. We aren't taking a side. We just want you to have a fully balanced 360-degree understanding.
And that is crucial because the pushback here is significant and it's deeply rooted in the local geography and history. Let's start with the ecological and livelihood concerns.
Right. Building a maritime city in the water obviously alters the coast.
Drastically. For the local fisherfolk, this project threatens their immediate livelihood, primarily because the port mandates restricted activities within a 12 nautical mile radius. That is a massive chunk of traditional fishing waters suddenly rendered off limits.
And then there are the severe ecological concerns regarding the destruction of mangroves. Mangroves aren't just pretty trees. They serve as crucial ecological buffers against coastal erosion and storm surges. Ripping them out fundamentally destabilizes that ecosystem.
It does. But the resistance isn't just about the immediate environmental impact. It is heavily influenced by a profound historical trauma regarding land acquisition in this specific region.
Right, the Terrapore parallel. The sources explicitly mention the Terrapore atomic power station. What happened there, and why does it haunt this new project?
So decades ago, land was acquired in the region for the Terrapore atomic project. Many of the affected families reportedly struggled to receive their rightful compensation or adequate rehabilitation, with some of those battles lasting for decades.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when the state comes back decades later asking for more land for a new mega project, that historical memory creates a massive trust deficit.
You can entirely understand why a local resident would say, we've heard this before, and that trust deficit has manifested into highly organized institutional pushback, right?
Exactly. Local communities have organized under groups like the Vadhavan Bandar Varodi Senghar Samiti. They have literally been resisting this for nearly 3 decades over cultural and economic heritage.
3 decades of resistance. That's not just a minor protest.
No, and it has evolved into significant legal hurdles. There is a public interest litigation, a PIL, filed by the Conservation Action Trust, specifically citing the catastrophic environmental impacts of reclaiming the sea and destroying those mangrove buffers.
So you have this incredibly complex dynamic. On one side, undeniable national economic growth and strategic autonomy. On the other side, undeniable ecological destruction, loss of livelihoods, and a massive trust deficit. So how do we convert all of this into an exam-ready format?
Let's lay out the 250-word answer structure for the way forward.
Okay, let's give them the blueprint.
First, your context. Start with India's geographic transshipment deficit, the shallow continental shelf, and the $1.6 to $2 trillion XMM goal. That sets the stage.
Got it. Then the dimensions.
Yes. For dimensions, hit the Rs 76,000 crore PPP landlord model, the 298 MMT capacity, and its role as a strategic node for IMEC.
Perfect. And the challenges we just discussed.
Right. For challenges, explicitly mention the loss of ecological buffering from mangroves, livelihood displacement within the 12 nautical mile radius, and the Terraport trust deficit. Use those exact terms.
And finally, the recommendations, or the way forward. Use that administrative vocabulary we talked about.
So, your recommendations need to synthesize this. Suggest strict institutional strengthening for fair, transparent land acquisition to solve the trust deficit. Advocate for robust public-private partnerships for automation to avoid red tape.
And for the environment?
Recommend integrating advanced environmental compensation models to balance economic growth with ecological preservation. If you destroy a buffer, the project must fund the aggressive rehabilitation of new ecological zones.
That is a high-scoring structure right there. Okay, it is time for the outro and our final revision capsule. Let's do the ultimate 30-second last-minute summary. Give me the 5 must-remember facts.
1. Our 76,220 crore cost.
Sure.
2. 298 MMT or 23.2 million TEUs capacity. 3. It solves the 4.2 million TEU foreign transshipment drain caused by the continental shelf. 4. It's a strategic node for IMEC and INSTC. And 5. It faces 3-decade opposition over mangroves and 12 nautical mile fishing restrictions.
Brilliant. Now, the 5 analytical keywords to underline.
Landlord model PPP, PM Gati Shakti, economies of agglomeration, strategic autonomy, and ecological buffer.
And finally, give us the one probable high-level question they should write down to practice.
The question is, evaluate the strategic and economic significance of the Vadhavan port project in achieving India's XMN trade targets while critically analyzing the ecological and socio-economic challenges associated with its implementation.
That covers all the bases perfectly. Thank you for joining us for this intensive War Room deep dive. It's a dense topic, but understanding this is essential to seeing where the global economy is heading.
It absolutely is.
But before you go, I want to leave you with one final provocative closing thought to mull over. We talked at length about how India currently relies heavily on Colombo and Sri Lanka for transshipment.
Right. Millions of containers.
Millions. Sri Lanka's economy is deeply intertwined with servicing that Indian trade. Once Vadhavan is fully operational and India suddenly stops routing its massive trade through Colombo, how will that shift the balance of power and alliances in the Indian Ocean?
That is the big question.
When the money moves, the power moves. Keep an eye on the water. We'll see you in the next deep dive.